My name is Brooke Sandoval. I'm the Associate Director for Admissions at American University Washington College of Law in Washington, D.C. And we're excited for you all to join us for this session today. We've gathered 6 law schools together from different parts of the country to talk specifically about making it work and financing law school. This is the second panel in a series of panels that we're doing with experienced law school admissions professionals and financial aid professionals. We will have another session, another panel series that you can sign up for, which will be I'm Admitted Now What? So that'll be our final in the series. So we're going to start today by having each of the panelists introduce themselves. They're going to tell you what school they're with and how long they've worked in the admissions and financial aid setting. So if my colleague at Boston College wants to start.
Thank you, Brooke. My name is Sean McShay. I'm the Assistant Dean for Graduate Enrollment Management at Boston College Law School. And in that role, I manage admissions, financial aid, recruitment, and retention. I've been in the law school admissions and enrollment industry for going on 19 years. So thank you for having me, and I look forward to sharing some insight on financial aid. Thank you.
Great. My colleague from Indiana University.
Yeah, hi, my name is Paul Leopold. I'm the Director of Financial Aid at the IU Maurer School of Law. I've been in financial aid for a total of 15 years this year, and this looks like I'm coming up on my 11th year at the law school. And I handle everything from awarding scholarships to processing loans to counseling, repayment.
Great, thank you. And my colleague at American University.
Hello, everyone. My name is Akira Sharama. I'm the Assistant Dean of Admissions and Financial Aid at American University Washington College of Law. I oversee all the JD admissions process and scholarships as well. And in terms of how long I've been doing this, over 20 years, so it's been a while.
Thank you. And my colleague at University of Southern California.
Hi, I'm David Kirshner. I'm the Associate Dean of Admissions and Financial Aid at USC Gould School of Law in Los Angeles, California. I've worked in law school admissions for just about 15 years and have had direct oversight of financial aid for the past 2 years, but have worked with scholarships my entire career. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you. And my colleague at Northwestern.
Thank you, Brooke, and thank you everyone for showing up this afternoon. My name is Johan Lee. I am the Assistant Dean of Admissions and Financial Aid here at Northwestern Pritzker School of Law. And I have been doing admissions for about 21 years. And so if my career was a person, I can actually drink legally now. So I oversee both JD admissions, LLM admissions, scholarships, fellowships, the whole 9 yards. So anyway, thank you for coming, and I look forward to participating in this panel. Back to you, Brooke.
Great. And my colleague at Fordham Law School.
Hi, I'm Stephen Brown, Assistant Dean for Enrollment at Fordham. Primary responsibility in admissions, financial aid. I've done some registrar work, some institutional research, so that keeps it interesting. I actually began my career in financial aid a little more than 30 years ago. And for the last 20 have been at Fordham and doing admissions and financial aid.
Great, thank you so much. So what we're going to do today, there's a lot of information to cover. So I'm going to sort of be moderating with the panel and checking the chat and the Q&A. We are going to cover a number of topics. And so we're hoping that we can maybe get to some questions at the end. But because there's a lot of information in this, we may not get a chance to handle all your questions. So please keep that in mind. Also, after this panel is done, we will, right now we've allotted up till about 4:30 for the panel, and maybe again, adding some questions at the end. And then at around 4:30 or maybe a little earlier if we wrap up early, we will have individual school rooms, Zoom rooms. And so my colleague at Boston College will put a slide up at the end that you can either take a screenshot of or copy and paste the links. So each school will be hosting a Zoom room. So if you have more school-specific questions, either about their financial aid process or about their admissions process, we really ask that you address those in the school Zoom rooms. And again, you can sort of hop in and out of different school Zoom rooms. So we're going to sort of be staffing those rooms for at least 30 minutes plus following this webinar. So again, I would ask that you hold more school-specific questions and ask those in the individual Zoom rooms. We also are recording this session. So we're hoping to send out the recorded link to all registered participants. So if you can only stay for part of the session, you can have access to the full recording after the session. So we're going to go ahead and get started. Again, we've sort of made topics in sort of groupings. And so each of my colleagues is going to sort of handle a different type of financial aid, different types of questions regarding financial aid. So we're going to start with Dean Sharoma at American University, talking about things you can do prior to applying to law school.
Thank you, Brooke. Yes, I'm going to talk about things you do prior to applying to law school. I think first and foremost, you definitely want to get your financial house in order. A student's credit history can definitely affect the Grad Plus and private loans if you decide to go the private loan route as well. The one thing you have to remember is that in terms of your debt, you want to definitely try to reduce it as much as you can, because once you get your financial aid award from many schools, they don't cover things like car payments, credit card debt payments, or previous law school loans. So, you know, it is, or not law school, but previous school loans. Although there is a deferment that might be available, you need to check with your financial aid office at the school that you're going to or that you have the loans out in as you go through the process. But again, you want to kind of bring it down. You can't pay for that, you know, expensive car while you're in law school with any of the money that you're going to be provided by the school. Also, you want to make a list of financial aid and scholarship deadlines for all the schools you're applying to. I definitely encourage you to put out a very detailed spreadsheet, putting dates, deadlines, and other things as well, application deadlines and what have you. There are sometimes dates that go by, and if you miss a specific date, that you might not be eligible. So you want to definitely make sure that you manage your process as you go. Also, I strongly encourage everyone to ask schools for a application fee waiver before applying. Many schools do offer it. It is school by school basis. Some of them will give you a code. Other ones will be automatic. Other schools might make you apply for a fee waiver. But again, that could be a significant savings for you as well. Some schools, and again, unfortunately, my school doesn't provide this, but I think I want to talk about it, as there are some schools that will also provide CAS waivers. Again, it never hurts to ask, and that could save you a significant amount of money as well. And the CAS is a credential service through law services. So again, make sure you go ahead and ask about that too. The one thing you're going to remember is that, you know, in terms of the LSAT, a lot of schools will tie their awards to LSAT scores and your undergrad GPA. So prior to law school, you want to kind of build that into your equation and think about trying to do the best you can to have the best opportunities for financial aid as well as admissions at any number of schools. And again, a lot of these points will be discussed later on in the process in much more detail. I'm just kind of quickly going over it. Also, you need to think about saving money to take the LSAT and the CAS if you have to pay for it. A lot of students are kind of surprised, like, oops, I'm supposed to come up with this money now. So you want to make sure that you know what it's going to cost and you have everything together and you're all organized and make sure that it is going to have enough efficient amount of money to be able to do that. My last point is going to be start saving money now. You know, say for example that you're living in Chicago and you decide that you want to move to Boston, go to law school. You're going to need to go ahead and save up some money beforehand for moving expenses and what have you. And sometimes your financial aid award that covers at least some of it won't come in time to cover your move. So you want to start saving money to a certain extent to make sure that you can have efficient funds to be able to move and take care of anything you need to do. Going forward, the other folks will give you a much more detailed perspective on many of the things I've already touched upon. So that's about it for me.
Great, thank you, Dean Sharoma. So next we're going to have Dean Sean McShay from Boston College give sort of an overview of types of financial aid, focusing mostly on entering students. So Dean McShay.
Thank you, Brooke. And thank you, Akira, for kind of setting that tone. First, I want to always encourage students to take care of some of the easier points first. If you know that you are thinking about law school, applying for the FAFSA, completing the FAFSA is one of those important steps that you might just want to go ahead and get out of the way. It does require tax information, and I'm hoping that one of my colleagues can go ahead and put a link to that in the chat while I'm speaking so that you have that information. But pull up the website and look at all of the requirements that are necessary for the FAFSA so that you can think about things that you need to start gathering right now so that that process will be easier for you. So FAFSA, FAFSA.gov, and thank you, Steve, for posting that in the chat. So as you're thinking about financing a legal education, there are lots of different options for you to consider. And so for ease of thought, I'm going to try to break this component down into basically two categories. The first category is going to be the resources that you do not have to pay back. And then the second category is going to be the resources that you do have to pay back. And so as you start looking at your law school options, I want to encourage each one of you to start maximizing on this first category, which are the things that you don't have to pay back. And so we're going to start off with an area that's generally kind of referred to as free money. I don't consider it free money because you've had to do a lot of things to get yourself in a position where you can earn, significant scholarships at different law schools, but that's where we'll get started. So in the free category, the free money category, I generally like to talk about two things. One would be merit-based scholarships. And the other would be need-based support, which is often in the form of grants. So each school may have its own parameters by which it determines merit-based aid. Generally speaking, merit-based aid may not require any, specific or additional applications, but bear in mind that there are special programs that each school may have that might require some additional work on your behalf. But generally speaking, merit-based aid is just something that for those candidates that are admitted into a program, the institution will consider them for merit-based aid. And this aid could range from, any amount, probably from as low as $200 to $500, probably fully up to full tuition, and perhaps even full tuition plus stipends in some situations. So you certainly want to be mindful of the range of options that are there. Most merit-based scholarships do not require additional work in between the years in which you are a member of that community. And so if you, for example, if you were at my institution in particular, if you were to receive X amount of scholarship dollars, then that would be your scholarship for your 3-year life cycle at the law school. Now, bear in mind for anyone who is considering dual degrees that those resources are separate, and you would not get any scholarship from a law school while you are attending, let's say, a business school. So I just wanted to put that out there for anyone who is also considering that. In addition to there not being a special scholarship application, generally speaking, you might find that merit-based aid may be based upon quantitative factors such as your LSAT score, your undergraduate GPA, and perhaps any additional variables that a school might deem important or meritorious for their process. So again, this will be handled by the individual institutions, and please check into the options of how each school that you're applying to will consider that process. On the other side of some of this free money that I've mentioned would be some need-based grants. Need-based grants are typically awarded annually, and as a result, they may require an application. For that application, you may be required to provide tax information your own tax information, you may also be required to provide tax information for that of your parents or your partners. And so I want you to bear in mind that, again, this is a school specific process, and each school will manage these things a little bit differently. Traditionally, need-based grants are based upon your financial situation and or your family financial situation. So that's why tax forms of your individual tax forms and that of your parents might be required. Most schools will consider you an independent student, so they may not require your parental data, but there are some who will require it. So just be mindful. Certainly, if you're someone who's coming directly, through the K through JD pipeline, as well as someone who is maybe just a year or 2 or 3 out of school, that might be required. And in most instances, again, check with the institution to see whether or not they would be willing to move forward without that information in the event that you cannot secure it. Again, you need to check with the individual institution. Need-based grants oftentimes can be combined with other financial resources, for example, merit-based aid and certainly third party or outside scholarships. So that's a traditional characteristic. And based upon your financial situation, there are instances where, let's say in your upper level school years, there are instances where that aid might be reduced if you've earned significant income, let's say over your summers prior to the next academic year. So those are some of the options as it relates to the free money. And again, I want to reiterate that you want to maximize all of the resources that you're able to secure through this particular type of funding option. So merit-based scholarships and need-based grants are some of the free resources that I've just pointed out. Now, on the other end of this is the money that you have to pay back. That money traditionally comes in the form of loans. And for anyone who is eligible for federal loans, I would recommend that you start off in that particular area. So, some of the benefits of federal student loans is that there are no significant or substantive credit requirements. Uh, they offer multiple repayment options. And in fact, they offer, pretty long repayment plans for those who are enrolled in a federal program. And then in addition to that, there are other protections that are afforded to people who are eligible for federal loans. The first of our federal loans, and there are two, the first is the federal direct unsubsidized loan. For the federal direct unsubsidized loan, students are able to borrow up to $20,500 per academic school year. Because it is unsubsidized, that means that your interest payments will begin from the moment those funds are dispersed to your institution. There are no payments that are due while you're in school. There is no credit check. And the grace period upon you exiting school is 6 months. In terms of the payment plans that I mentioned a little bit earlier, typically 10 to 25 years are the repayment options that are available for students who apply for a federal direct unsubsidized loan. Now, let's say you have received a scholarship and or a grant from an institution, you've taken out the federal loan, and you still haven't reached a point where you have secured all of the resources that are necessary for you to attend law school for that particular year. Well, there is another option and another loan that is available, and that is the Federal Direct Plus loan, which we generally just refer to as the Grad Plus. Minus all other aid options, the Grad Plus law schools have the option of certifying a grad plus for any unmet need that you have up to the cost of attendance. So for example, if your cost of attendance is $80,000 a year and all of your other aid resources tally up to about $60,000 per year, there is an additional $20,000 of unmet need that you have up to the cost of attendance, which you might see represented on law schools' websites as COA. That cost of attendance, uh, so if you wanted to apply for a grad plus loan, the maximum eligibility that any of us could, especially if our cost of attendance is 80,000 and you've already secured 60,000 of that funding, the maximum that we could certify that loan is for an additional $20,000. That $20,000 represents the unmet need that you have from all other sources of funds up to that cost of attendance. So again, if you don't have a whole host of additional options, and for example, if you are not eligible for federal loans, then your only option then would be to find a private lender that would lend resources to a student who doesn't qualify for federal aid, or to find a U.S. co-signer who would be willing to sign uh, uh, as a support mechanism for that particular loan. And so I know that I've put a lot of resources out there highlighting merit-based aid, need-based grants, as well as federal loans in the terms of an unsubsidized loan, which again is maximized at 20,500 per year, and then grad plus loans, which could be up to the cost of attendance. Beyond those federal options, private loans, for private loans, they tend to have significantly higher interest rates. And again, those funds would come directly to the institution. And then that's where I'll leave it, because I know, again, that's a whole lot of information. And so I'll turn it back over to you, Brooke, and then I'll be happy to answer any additional questions that may come as a result of some of those options that I provided. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Dean McShay. I know there's a lot of information for you all, and I know you all are posting questions in the Q&A, and so the panelists are trying to answer some of those while they're not personally speaking. So we're trying to get through some of those questions in that. Some of the questions that you all posted are going to be answered later in the webinar. So if you're not getting your question answered right away through the Q&A, it might be because, again, we're going to address that a little bit later in the webinar. So next up, now that Dean McShay has sort of talked about the types of aid, we're going to talk about sort of the timing for applying for financial aid. So Director Leopold at Indiana is going to cover that part.
Good afternoon. I'm going to try to share a screen with you. Hopefully that's going to show up. Can you guys see the presentation okay? Great, great. Okay, so I am going to talk about the timing of financial aid, when you should be applying for things. And the short answer to that is it depends, but naturally there's more to it than that. Your financial aid deadlines are going to vary by the school that you're applying to and by the type of financial aid that you are seeking. I think when trying to figure out these deadlines, you should really use the school website as your primary resource. Schools may also send out checklists to you. Other websites probably show deadlines for schools, but that information is only as good as the last time it was updated. So I would really rely on the school as your primary resource. If you have any questions about a deadline, certainly contact the admissions office or the financial aid office, and they should be able to provide you with more information. Overall, as we've discussed already, there's many different types of aid and there's different deadlines. So being organized is going to be very important to your ultimate success. Now, a couple of years ago, my niece was applying to school and I was helping her through the application process. And she was applying to like 5 or 6 different schools. And I really found that I needed a spreadsheet in order to really track what was going on. And so, for example, you can create a simple spreadsheet that lists the different law schools that you're applying to, the type of application that you would be submitting. And then here you can put the dates of when those are due. And what I would actually do is I would input the date, but then make it a hyperlink to the source on the school's webpage where you can find more detail about that. And then I also, of course, put in financial aid information because I wanted to figure out what was going to be the best financial deal ultimately for her. So I definitely, you want to stay organized, and you need some sort of tool to help track everything. Now, in terms of merit scholarships, typically merit scholarship decisions are going to be made at the time you were admitted or shortly thereafter. Those decisions oftentimes are going to be based on the data provided on your law school application. That said, assuming that a limited pool of funding exists for scholarships, I think as a general guiding principle, the earlier that you can apply, the better, so that you have a better chance of receiving a merit scholarship offer. Now, law school admissions are kind of fluid though, and an admissions office goals could change as you progress through the admission cycle. And so if you decide to apply to a school later in the process, that doesn't necessarily mean you wouldn't receive a merit scholarship offer. At least you will want to check with the school that you're applying to, of course. So there may still be a chance. You'll just want to investigate that some more. And there may be instances where you retake the LSAT and your score improves, and perhaps you can contact the admissions office for additional reconsideration. They probably have information on that about their website, whether they accept new scores and that sort of thing. So that's merit scholarships. In terms of need-based scholarships, most schools are going to require that you submit the FAFSA and that be completed with parental data. The 21-22 FAFSA, that's the FAFSA for the academic period that starts this coming fall semester, opened October 1st. So you can file that anytime. But some schools beyond the FAFSA may require a separate financial need application, and that could include completing the CSS profile, and they may also have an institutional financial aid application that you want to submit. In general, the deadlines are going to vary for when you want to submit a need-based application. However, I don't think typically you would apply for those kind of resources until after you've been admitted to the school. Some schools may also require that you submit supplementary documentation along with your application. And in those instances, it might not be a bad idea if you can file your 2020 taxes early. That might be helpful in case the school requests more up-to-date information. Okay, now, so we've talked about merit scholarships, we've talked about need-based scholarships, and then one thing that I didn't mention, but I'll mention briefly, is external scholarships. These are scholarships that are available, to any student, any law student, typically, irregardless of institution, although some are institution specific. Some of those applications are available already, and so you may want to begin your search for those. Now, beyond scholarships, we look at federal student aid, which should really be, for the most part, as a first-year student, means student loans. And so again, you can file your FAFSA as early as October 1st. You want to be sure to include the various school codes of the schools that you're applying to. I think there's a maximum of 10 if they haven't increased it, but if you hit the maximum, you can later take schools off and add new schools. FAFSA is going to use prior year tax data. So when you file the 21-22 FAFSA, it's going to be based on 2019 income and tax return information. Schools' deadlines are going to vary for when you have to file the FAFSA. In general, my thing is, the earlier that you can file a FAFSA, the earlier potential problems can be identified. For example, if the Department of Education selects you for a process called verification. It would be nice to be able to complete that process earlier rather than later, or if there's a social security number issue or a citizenship issue, those can be resolved early so that they're taken care of well before a school starts. You should check the school's website to see if there's a priority date for filing the FAFSA, as some types of aid may be tied to that date. So at IU Bloomington, our priority date is April 15th, for example. At the moment, that date at our school anyways doesn't hold much significance, but there have been times in the past where, for example, if a student didn't meet the on-time priority deadline, they wouldn't be eligible for, let's say, Perkins loans, which currently don't exist, but at least at that time, it was important to hit the priority deadline. So anyway, so we move on a little bit. So schools typically are going to package you with student loans after you've been admitted to the school and they've received your FAFSA. And then they're going to send you out a financial aid notification shortly after you've been awarded. That notification is going to include the loans that you've been offered and any scholarships, hopefully, that you've been offered. As stated before, typically, it's a very predictable process. Most eligible students are going to receive a $20,500 direct unsubsidized loan. Some schools will also automatically award you the maximum amount of Graduate Plus loan for which you are eligible. Other schools require you to visit studentaid.gov to submit your Plus loan request. In terms of, like, for my school, you wouldn't want to really submit that request until after you receive your financial aid notification. And at IU anyways, they might not actually turn the Plus loan application live until April or May. So I always try to keep in contact with students about that. If you need to borrow more than the $20,500 in direct unsubsidized loan, you definitely want to review your credit history now. Now is a good time to do that. You can go to annualcreditreport.com to do that. Not free annual credit report, but annualcreditreport.com. No credit history is fine. You just want to see if there are any issues with your credit that you can identify. After you have been awarded aid, received your financial aid notification, there'll be other follow-up tasks that you need to take, like completing loan entrance counseling, completing master promissory notes, student loan acknowledgments, setting up direct deposits, information if you're going to receive a financial aid refund. Ideally, you want to have all of these tasks completed well before school starts in August or September. That way, you'll hit the ground running financially. Financial aid is not going to disperse typically till about 10 days prior to the beginning of the semester. And the financial aid refunds often won't be received till a week before the semester begins. So you want to plan to be able to support yourself financially up to that point. And then as far as billing goes, typically you're billed tuition half in the fall and half in the spring, and your financial aid also disperses half in the fall and half in the spring. So in terms of timing, again, it varies. Rely on your schools, rely on the financial aid office, the admission office to inform you of these deadlines, and stay organized so that you can have a successful journey through this process. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Director Leopold. That was very helpful. And a lot of the students have already said they want copies of your slides. So we may have to make those available in case they didn't get a chance to screenshot. Again, we are recording this session. So it may take a few days or so for us to be able to email out the recording to everybody that's registered, but you will eventually have access to the full recording too, and you could always copy the slides from there as well. So now we're going to move in. Dean Kirshner from USC is going to talk more about financial aid for some distinctive or special groups that may have some special considerations. So Dean Kirshner.
Great, thank you, Brooke. And yeah, I know I've seen a number of questions in the Q&A and in the chat about some of these groups, particularly international students. So hopefully I'll be able to answer some of those questions. You know, and kind of first, to clarify, so federal aid from the United States government is available to U.S. citizens, permanent residents, and certain groups of refugees. Dean Brown had mentioned that in the chat a little earlier, and that's all very highly regulated by the U.S. Department of Education and federal regulations. So as law schools, we don't have any say. So generally speaking, for international students as well as for DACA students, that's the other primary group that I'm going to discuss. Need-based loans from the United States government are normally not going to be an option, simply because of the way the regulations are written. So for international students, I know sometimes your home country or your country of citizenship, they may offer opportunities. American students are sometimes, US citizens are sometimes able to access certain types of funding to study in foreign countries. And I do know, at least at Gould, we have had citizens of foreign countries on grants or fellowships from their government. So that's somewhere to look. Right, so that's on the need-based aid side. On the merit-based side, the news is definitely better. Most law schools do have that merit-based aid process open to international students. Merit-based aids at many law schools are need blind, meaning that your FAFSA is not part of the equation when looking at merit-based aid in that process. So that's the good news. On the front for non-U.S. citizens, permanent residents, or the small category of refugees. There are merit-based aid options out there. That's that's the gist of it for international students. As far as DACA students or dreamers, I found in being in California, we are one of the more DACA-friendly states, and the state certainly makes a difference in what kind of aid is available. So a lot of the aid for DACA students that I know of is very specific to students looking to pursue their law degrees in California. But I have no doubt that there are other states out there that also offer similar types of aid for students in the United States under the DACA program. And just like international students, we don't treat DACA students or international students any differently when looking at merit-based aid. So those students remain fully eligible for merit-based aid. So I guess in a nutshell, on the need-based aid side, there are certainly differences to be aware of, and funding will be a challenge. But on the merit-based side, I think students in these special categories will find that there is aid available to them. That leads to the next piece I want to discuss, and that is kind of researching outside scholarship options. And there are many options out there that are targeted at students from diverse backgrounds, from first-generation students, and for DACA students. And it just takes some time. I think one of the keys here is to realize, right, so there's applying to law school, and that's one task that you need to budget time for. But then there's also financing law school. And the fact that you're here at this webinar today says you understand, you already understand the importance of that piece. So a little time spent researching outside scholarship opportunities that may be specifically targeted to your background could be incredibly beneficial. I will put a few resources in the chat when I finish my discussion. Again, many of them are state specific, but there are some resources out there that are geared for a wider search. One group that has some resources is Access Lex. They're a major player in the law student financial aid industry. And another one is a resource you may be familiar with from applying to colleges, and that's FastWeb. They're a clearinghouse with a lot of different scholarship information. For those of you, who may have a state in mind, a lot of state bar associations will also have scholarship opportunities. And in California, the California Bar runs a program called Change Lawyers, and that offers scholarship assistance to incoming first years as well as second and third year students. That's been a very successful program. So I would encourage you to check with a variety of state bars. And I see Dean McShay posted some links, so thank you for that. but check with the state bars in the states you are interested in potentially pursuing your law degree, because they may have resources. And kind of the last thing I want to conclude with is, think a little bit, if you think a little bit outside the box, you may also find some great financial opportunities. So they may not necessarily help fund law school directly, but they could help situate you to be a stronger applicant and potentially earn more merit-based scholarship dollars. So there are programs out there like CLEO, the Council on Legal Education and Opportunity, who have law school prep programs that are free of charge or offer scholarships to minority students. There are law firms out there in seeking to increase representation, particularly at the large law firm level, that run fellowship programs, that bring in LSAT prep, right? That offer a wide variety of financial resources free of charge. So one of those is the Munger, Tolles, and Olson Fellows Program, MTO Fellows. With COVID, many of these programs, if not all of them, have shifted virtually. So they're even more accessible. So I would encourage you to think outside the box a little bit and seek out some of those opportunities. With that, look forward to any of your questions and happy to provide more resources.
Great, thank you so much, Dean Kirshner. And again, we've been posting some of these into the chat. And as we've been going along, the panelists have also been answering some of the Q&A questions as much as we can too. So next, we're going to talk about other financial resources to think about. Dean Lee from Northwestern is going to discuss some other options to put on your radar.
Thank you, Brooke. Thank you so much. And one word of warning, it's the end of the school day for my kids. And so if you hear a lot of griping in the background by a 9-year-old or 11-year-old, yeah, that's coming from my side. So just be forewarned about that. So I get the privilege of talking about everything else that no one has talked about thus far. So basically other financial resources, other things for you to think about during your law school career about how to finance law school. The one thing that there are about there are 3.5 different things I'm going to talk about. So, and you'll understand the half part once I get to it. The first thing that a lot of students, especially those that are coming straight from undergrad, ask is, is work study available at law schools? Can I do work study? So I got my scholarship, I got my NeedBased grant, but can I do work study? Or are there any additional fellowships? The fact of the matter is, work study is, it's a federal program, and each institution treats work study differently. So for some institutions, there's straight up work study available for you at the law school to work during the year. Other schools may try to aggregate their work study for the summertime, so that more students will have access to that for maybe working in the clinic or things like that. So really, it depends on the school how they wish to treat their work study funds and what different jobs that are available. A lot of schools, faculty are hiring research assistants all the time. And sometimes these research assistants are during the school year, and sometimes they're during the summertime, and sometimes they're both. And so I think there are a lot of those sort of opportunities available to you as a law student as well. Now, working as a teaching assistant, research assistant, some of those things some of them are assigned by the financial aid office. A lot of them are chosen by the faculty member or by the professor. Once again, it's one of those things where it's a case-by-case basis, and it sort of depends on the school on how you go about doing that. A lot of schools will also have set up summer stipend programs or summer fellowship programs for one reason or another. Specifically, a lot of these summer stipend programs are public interest based. And so if you decide to either work in the clinic or work for a public interest organization, the school will offer you a living stipend of X amount of dollars, depending on the school. It can range anywhere from $5,000, and I've seen upwards of $15,000 to work during the summertime. So, which sort of leads into the question of, can I work during law school? whether that is on campus or off. Now, I've referred to a lot of the on campus stuff, but can I work off campus during my law school career? And I saw something in the chat about a question about being a first year law student and working. And for the most part, you're really not supposed to work during your first year in law school, especially during your first semester. It's one of those things that's written in pretty much every single school's rules and regulations. It's just really not advised at the end of the day. But for the most part, at least it seems like it's a don't ask, don't tell sort of policy. But at the end of the day, for your law school career, for your post-law career, it's just better to focus on your studies during your first year. Now, I think during your second year, there's some flexibility there. And I think with more schools, at least my school, I know we do intersessionals. And so you can get credits for taking courses during winter break, during spring break. You get credits during the summer. So you can load up your credits such that you can take a lighter load one semester, and you can use that to go job searching, or you can use that to work, and try to earn some capital and some cash that way. And I think if you decide to, let's say, work for a law firm between your first year, second year, there are always potentials for doing project work during your second year, or even during your third year during the school year. So fixed project work just for a few $1,000s here and there. And so I think the third sort of bucket I want to talk about is our scholarships and other aid available for upper level students that may not be available during your first year. And I think for those particular scholarships, I think if you go to a school that is a completely need-based school, and there are some schools out there that all their aid is need-based, and Steve's kind of looking at me like, are you serious? No. There are schools that are all need-based, and as a result, they reevaluate every year. And so you may have a $50,000 scholarship going into your first year, but that may adjust during your second year. And then when you work at that large firm job, it may adjust again for your third year, or vice versa. You may start out lower, but then more expenses pile up, and the need calculus changes, and then your aid goes up your second year and it goes up your third year. So for those particular schools, it's reevaluated every year. Other than that, some schools have endowed scholarships, and endowed scholarships sometimes have conditions placed upon them. So some schools have scholarships that are based on first year performance. So there'll be a second year scholarship where if you got an A in property, you get an additional $1,000 added in. So once again, it's a school by school thing. You should probably ask the individual school that you're going to, or in the springtime, when you receive all your aid awards, you can ask these follow-up questions to the various financial aid offices. So I talked about work studies, I talked about working, I talked about additional scholarships while you're in law school as an upper level student, and so that's three. And then there's the half, and the half I think is really particular to this year, and that's COVID related funds. One thing that we saw when we basically when law school started to shut down in the springtime and we transitioned into the fall is that a lot of our students were impacted by COVID financially. And as a result, many schools stepped up with various programs in order to help out with regards to COVID-related expenses. Some schools loaned out additional funds for COVID-related expenses. Some schools gave grants for COVID-related expenses. And some schools, the grants were not only grants that help make ends meet, but also grants in order to ramp up the ability to do this sort of thing, to work virtually and to study virtually. So, and so there are a lot of these sort of funds available. Whether they continue on into the next academic year, who knows? Who knows? You have to ask my friend Fauci about that. But for the most part, a lot of schools have dedicated resources, at least for this particular year, in order to cover any these sort of COVID-related expenses. So on that note, that's my 3.5, and a lot of the odds and ends that are associated with financial aid and financing your legal education. Back to you, Brooke.
Great, thank you, Dean Lee. So now we actually are going to move on and talk a little bit more about post-grad financial resources, because we think it's important for you all to understand what's available for you as a recent grad and sort of into your career. And our colleague, Dean Brown, has been amazing, I know, answering lots of questions in the Q&A. So now he's going to talk more about post-grad financial resources.
So I'm actually sharing screen 2. Hopefully you're seeing this. So federal public service loan forgiveness. I'll talk about that first, because that's a pretty substantial program, and it gets a lot of bad press, including this morning. I saw this news article that came out, and the new president's going to change all of this. Well, the program is okay for most people, but the bad press is that nobody's eligible for it, and that's what the new Secretary of Education will do. So you have to understand some of this in terms of the requirements, and it certainly is very different for people who started school prior to 2010, which interestingly enough is 10 years ago. So prior to 2010, most students who were borrowing loans had the wrong loans for this program. So public service loan forgiveness is easy. It's the greatest thing since sliced bread, or maybe not. It depends. So it's looking for people who want a career in government or public service. So the requirements are pretty simple. The details are where it matters. You have to have the right loans. You have to have the right repayment plan, the right job, and the right number of payments. So here we go through this in a few minutes. So the right loans, direct loans. So all loans all loans subsequent to, after July 1st, 2010 are direct loans. All the federal loans are direct loans. Prior to 2010, the majority of borrowers did not have federal direct loans, and those loans do not count for public service loan forgiveness. Interestingly, as part of the Affordable Care Act, all federal loans went to be were made direct loans after July 1st, 2010. So if you have a direct Stafford or unsubsidized Stafford, an undergrad direct Stafford Grad Plus, or direct consolidation loan, if you had some of those prior loans, those are the right loans. Only those loans count. Private loans don't count. Federal loans through banks, they called them FELP loans at that time, don't count. They have to be direct loans. So some percentage of the people who were denied had the wrong loans. Right repayment plan, 10-year standard amortized repayment plan. That's the basic repayment plan for all federal loans. You could also choose to repay under an income contingent repayment plan. Generally not a terribly good program. The income-based repayment, or the new income-based repayment program, depending on the 2012 version or 2014 version. 2014, the pay-as-you-earn program, the pay program, or the repay program, or any other repayment plan where the minimum monthly payment is greater than the 10-year amortized payment. That's important. Some of the loans, some of the borrowers are not paying on any of these plans. They're paying on some other standard plan or some extended plan. Only these count. So that's critical. Like 18% of the people who were denied were on the wrong repayment plan. Actually, Congress in 2018 and 2019 appropriated $350 billion to help borrowers who were on the wrong repayment plan. Very few were taking advantage of it, which we're really surprised at. All right, we had the right repayment plan. Did I freeze? How could I freeze? Okay, the right job. And it's easy. This is the right job. So this is from the law. Too much text violates all of the principles of PowerPoint. Full-time. Whatever your employer defines as full-time, as long as it's more than 30 hours, counts. And that generally falls into being with teachers who may not be working full-time or may not be working year-round. You can have a combination of jobs that is at least more than 30 hours a week. That counts for full-time. Okay, next requirement. It's either government or nonprofit or other public service. So government is easy. Federal, state, local, tribal, in the United States. Again, there's an article yesterday, military counts, the employers for service members in the Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, Coast Guard is the United States government. That's easy, that counts. Again, some really bad publicity yesterday saying that service members don't count for public service loan forgiveness. That is false. Federal, state, local, subsidiary of the federal government, or tribal government. Okay, what else counts a nonprofit? Nonprofit, the law defines, in the prior slide, as a 501c3 nonprofit. 501c3 is a section of the Internal Revenue Code that governs nonprofit public benefit corporations. If you're working for a C3, you are eligible. You don't have to be a lawyer. If you are not working for a C3, you may not be eligible. Let's talk about that. Perhaps other public service. Again, there's lots of detail in here that talks about other types of public service. Some count, some don't. The burden at this point is on you, the borrower, to find out if those employers count. What does not count? And this was the subject of lots of publicity. Labor unions don't count. They're not organized under C3. Political partisan organizations don't count. Interestingly enough, members of Congress wrote themselves out of this law. C4s don't count. Lobbying organizations. C7s and C8s and C2s or C6s, the American Bar Association is actually a professional organization. Doesn't count. C8s, a fraternal type organization. Or a guild or a union, doesn't count. Religious employers count unless your duties are related to religious instruction, worshiping, or any type of proselytizing. If you are a lawyer that works for a religious organization, as long as you're working on religious duties, your job would count. If you're not sure, ask your employer. Are you a government employer? Again, we've had people ask, yeah. So your local town, if it's a township, is a government employer. That's that local side. You can complete the employer certification form, which now is part of the forgiveness form as well. As of like 2 weeks ago, I saw it. It looks really pretty good. Yeah, check there. You can call Fed Loan Servicing. That's important because you want to make sure the job counts. There are a number of people in jobs that don't count who are not being forgiven. We talked about full-time, some amazing monthly payments under IBR or the pay-as-you-earn program. And that's where I'm going with the federal program. Now, law schools have their own version of public service loan forgiveness. Not all do, about half of them do. Some pay out over $1 million a year and some pay out $5,000 a year. So the question when you're considering schools is not, do you have a public service loan forgiveness program or a loan forgiveness program or an LRAP program? The question is, tell me about your LRAP program. What jobs qualify? How long is it? How does it work in terms of co-payments, things like that? So that's the school-based program. What types of jobs are eligible? Some schools, it's only federal jobs or it's only public interest jobs. They have their own requirements. So there are real details to that. So a question on congressional staffers. Congressional staffers are fine. You're government employees, but you're not representatives or senators. So that's fine. There are other public service fellowship programs like Equal Justice Works, like Skadden Fellowships, and there are others that I am forgetting in my 30 seconds more that I have to talk about this, that may offer loan forgiveness. There are employers that offer loan forgiveness. There are agencies within the government, the federal government, that offer their own loan repayment assistance that's different from the federal program. There are employers that offer loan repayment assistance, some public sector, some private sector. The cafeteria benefit programs organized under Section 250 of the Internal Revenue Code. There may be pre-tax programs that allow you to pay upfront for your loans. There may be programs that allow your employers to pay some of your federal education loans. A lot of information, very short period of time. Happy to answer questions on those.
Great, thank you so much. That was a lot of information, but I know we've had a lot of questions about loan repayment, so that was very helpful to have that information. We do have a time for some questions. We're probably going to break the panel at 4:15 so we can move into our Zoom rooms a little bit earlier, so that'll give you time to visit with hopefully with all the schools that you're interested in. A couple of questions that sort of have come up in the chat that haven't necessarily been answered, but one of the questions specifically to you, Dean Brown, somebody was asking, do all the years of public service have to be consecutive?
Oh, great question. No. So it's a total of 120 months of payments in your first 280 months of required payments. So it need not be consecutive. You can be working in a government position for 3 years, maybe take a private sector job for two years. That's fine. Come back to a nonprofit after that. You have to work an additional 7 years. So you have to make, so you have to be in an eligible job, making payments on time, and under an eligible payment plan. So they need not be consecutive. You can move in and out of this. The advice that we give our grads, if you're moving in and out of it every time, get that certification form. Keep track of your pay stubs, whether it's electronic or some employers still have paper pay stubs. So you can prove that you were working in any given month. I know plenty of our grads who have received loan forgiveness. The program does work. I've given presentations about this to various organizations. And people say, yes, I did receive forgiveness. Again, the coverage is really bad, and it's political, but fascinating in that both Presidents Trump and Obama tried to kill federal loan forgiveness in their White House budgets. They used the same language to do it. They were doing it for different political reasons. Current Congress does not seem to have an interest in doing anything like that. The president-elect has been talking on the campaign about forgiving $10,000 for everybody, about expanding loan forgiveness. There are no details on that yet, and there should not be expected to be. We've had people asking, should I borrow $10,000 in order to get it forgiven? I don't know. I don't know what any of the requirements are going to be on that. This program, though, is real. It has been in existence since 2007. Plenty of people have been forgiven. The key are the 4 simple requirements: right loans, right repayment plan, right jobs, and 120 months.
Great. Thank you so much, Dean Brown. So Dean McShay, I'm going to ask this question to you. Someone was asking, will any schools take into account your FAFSA statement when deciding merit-based scholarships, or will FAFSA only be considered to supplement merit scholarships already offered?
So the role of the FAFSA is to let us know whether or not you qualify for federal funds. So as the merit considerations are being made, I mean, they're not looking at your FAFSA in that instance. Number one, my institution in particular only has merit-based aid, not need-based aid. And so whether or not you qualify for need-based funds or whether or not you've completed a FAFSA is not taken into consideration. Also bear in mind that many institutions have separate admissions and financial aid offices in which, and some have overlap, but many have separate offices. And so your admissions decision will come from one side of that, and they have no idea of kind of your financial situation. And then the financial aid committee will be considering whatever information they've required to make a decision. For schools that may only have a merit-based process, who may also not have a unique scholarship application for that merit-based aid, we will simply give that information to the financial aid committee, and they will make those decisions in absence of the FAFSA data being there. My particular institution does federal aid a little bit later in the process. We typically do federal aid over the summer, in the earlier portion of the summer, as opposed to, requiring that you do it any earlier than that. So merit-based aid, all of my incoming students have merit-based aid before they have to pay a deposit, and we usually aren't working towards their federal aid until after they have deposited. And that will be different at every institution. So I want to give you kind of that caveat there.
Great, thank you, Dean McShay.
You're welcome.
So Director Leopold, I have a question for you. This attendee was asking, if I moved in with my parents during the pandemic and was able to save a bit on rent, is this going to negatively affect my FAFSA because they'll give me less aid with the first year expectation, then I'll use my entire, with the expectation that I'll use my entire savings. So I guess the question too is what percentage of savings is expected to fund law school regarding the FAFSA?
Sure. Well, in general, at least in terms of federal aid, which again, we're looking at student loans and potentially graduate work study, the EFC, or expected family contribution, which is derived from the data that you submit, isn't going to really impact greatly in most cases the types of loans you can receive or whether you're eligible for work study. It could impact work study, but the cost of attendance is so high that even with a high expected family contribution, you still have financial need where you can qualify for work study. Now, individual schools, however, when assessing students for need-based aid, might look at that type of information when determining what sort of awards you might be eligible for. So I guess indirectly, when it comes to the school, it could impact any need-based scholarships, but for federal aid, there really isn't going to be much of an impact.
And I'll just follow up with that on the federal aid side. The undergraduate level, there's, there are Pell Grants, there's SEOG, there are subsidized loans. The undergraduate level, all of this matters, your EFC matters. The graduate school level, since 2014, July 1st, 2014, there are no federal subsidized loans. That was taken care of to fund something else. Those were eliminated. So all you're doing on the FAFSA, to repeat, Leopold, the FAFSA is you're determining your eligibility for federal student aid. And that's it. They're testing to see that you're a citizen, permanent resident, or refugee. You have a social security number. If you're male, you're registered for the draft. You don't owe any federal refunds on prior education loans. No drug convictions while you were receiving federal aid. And that's kind of it. You can be rich and famous. You can be a gazillionaire and still qualify for $20,500 in subsidized and unsubsidized loans and Grad Plus loans up to cost of attendance less other aid, depending on your credit. So there are a lot of detailed questions on that. There's, and I would love to have answered this 7 years ago because I'd have really detailed answers on this, but not anymore because there are no federal subsidies for graduate professional students.
Great, thank you, Dean Brown. So now we have a question. I'm going to pose this to you, Dean Lee. A student was asking, how would we go about negotiating scholarships if you don't end up with an offer from a peer school? Do you have any general scholarship negotiation tips?
And I think, I think I read that, and peer was in quotation marks.
Yeah, right.
It's one of those questions that it depends from school to school. I know some schools that do not negotiate at all. So you could politely email their head of financial aid or their head of admissions with a wonderful request. Their final response is no, because they don't reevaluate. Some schools like mine, we do have a reevaluation process because we're asked so many times about reevaluating aid offers, and I think and we do have a set process. We provide you a drop-down box of schools that we would consider, ways of uploading your documents, and we try to formalize the process a little bit. I think as a general rule of thumb, when you ask a school for reevaluation of your aid package, first thing, do it politely. Have a nice email, put some emojis in there, have a smiley face, just ask nicely. Second is be realistic, meaning that please don't send a bunch of PDFs to me. I can count. I mean, if I had $1 for every time someone decided to send every single scholarship offer they received, the entire cycle in PDF as an attachment, I wouldn't be doing this job anymore. I would be retired in Hawaii. So if you're going to send offers to us unsolicited, then make sure it's only 1 or 2, not 15, not 20, with links to various websites. So I think what is a peer school? That's in your head. So I would say 1, ask nicely, and 2, when you do ask, make sure you send to us maybe the 1 or 2 schools you are most likely to consider, in addition to our own school. So, but then again, once again, school by school question. Once you're admitted to a bunch of schools in the spring, ask politely on what the procedures are.
Great, thank you. And I see we had a question here that Dean Brown was going to answer live about the post 9/11 the Yellow Ribbon program. How does that interact with merit-based aid?
So we didn't talk about veterans funding in general. There's some amazing funding that's out there for veterans who've served up to 3 years or more after September 11, 2001. Not getting into all the details here, but one of those, the Veterans Affairs would pay up to half tuition for many schools, although there's a cap on that. The Yellow Ribbon program is a wraparound. If the school pays additional money towards the veteran, the Department of Defense will wrap around that up to a total of full tuition. How does merit scholarship work? And I'm not sure who you are writing this or if it's a trick question, but the way the Department of Veterans Affairs and Defense are asking us to calculate awards under the Yellow Ribbon program are if we have awarded merit or need-based aid, any school aid that's awarded reduces the amount of tuition. And then, so if your tuition was $60,000 a year and we awarded you $20,000 in merit, the tuition that Department of Veterans Affairs would be considering would only be $40,000 a year. They would pay half, Yellow Ribbon and the Yellow Ribbon match would pay the other half. So as a technical question, veterans, talk to your VA office or talk to the school's veterans offices or financial aid offices. Very, very generous program. There are some details in that as well.
Great, thank you. So another attendee just posted something in the chat, which other students might want to know the answer to, sort of clarifying a little bit about the CAS fee. So maybe Dean Kirshner, if you could answer this. The student was asking, do we need only one CAS fee waiver from one school to cover all the applications, or do we need a CAS waiver from each?
Yeah, so for each school you apply to, there is a CAS report fee that LSAC charges. Schools are able to offer waivers for those CAS report fees, but it's not done as widely, say, as an application fee waiver. You can certainly ask individual schools what their policies are on CAS waivers, but each school you're applying to will bill a CAS. So LSAC will bill a CAS report fee for each school that you're applying to. I believe that's correct, but if I'm wrong, somebody feel free to jump in and correct me there. Great,
thank you. So another question, I think this, and I think anybody can sort of pipe in on this one. Somebody was asking, is there any sort of pre-1L checklist for students coming in for the fall, things that can help prepare during the summer specifically to become financially ready? So I know Dean Sharon, I know you sort of kicked off the webinar with some tips to think about. Are there other tips that people want to share with students to think about prior to coming in, pre-1L?
Well, I think overall, I mean, it's a good idea that you find out kind of what's going to be required in terms of payments. If you go to a school website, most of them have cost of attendance plus tuition and everything else, and they'll have, money for any number of things. They might not have money for you to travel home for Thanksgiving or for Christmas. They, might not be able to get the funds to you for your first last deposit for rent. I think a lot of it you might have faced already with your undergraduate education. But I think in terms of a checklist, it's definitely, kind of looking at what your needs are in terms of the process. Are you going to need to move? Are you going to have to relocate? Okay, put that in there. Are you going to need to have a car? Is there a mass transit? Is that going to be covered? Put that in there. There's lots of things to put on a checklist in terms of that. Now, granted, the schools do provide some money for transportation, typically in their cost of attendance, as well as miscellaneous expenses and so on. But some things might not. Maybe you have a car payment that's not going to be covered, so you need to put that on your checklist. How's that going to be paid for? Or are you going to go ahead and sell the car? It just really depends. I don't think there's one standard checklist for everybody for everything before law school. But I think, a lot of the panelists here today have brought up, things to consider. If you do want to apply for need-based, making sure you hit the FAFSA, and get those deadlines by when they're supposed to be done. If you're interested in applying for a scholarship, again, grade it all out, find out each school what you're interested in, come up with your own checklist. And I think, again, the panelists today gave a lot of different feedback on what you should be thinking about as you're going through the process and what happens before, during, and afterwards. And they're a great checklist. And I think, take copious notes and make your own checklist and make sure you hit them all. You want to talk about loan forgiveness. You want to talk about, what type of things, is it all need? Is it all merit? What are the scholarship levels? How much the scholarship is. Maybe there's merit that only goes up to a certain level. It doesn't go full tuition. Some schools, only have full tuition. They don't have plus. So then you're going to have to think about, okay, well, then I'm going to have to get something else in terms of funding for housing if I'm not living somewhere where it's covered. Again, the list goes on, but again, I don't think there's one generic one like you can get from Reader's Digest for undergraduate, which I did for my daughter. It's like, oh, what to get for my daughter who's going to school. But it is something that, there are so many different considerations, and I think you need to look at your needs and decide what will work best for you. But, again, feel free to reach out to the law schools that can walk you through it. Pre-law advisor, a great resource for that as well. They give you some other background factors. Yeah.
Yeah, Kira, I'd like to add a couple of items to that as well. I mean, especially if you are moving, when you're thinking about law school and you're going to be moving across country and perhaps to a major metropolitan area, such as a lot of those that are on the East Coast, where they require, in order to sign a lease, you might be required to have more than 1 month of payment. And in some instances, you might be required to have at least 2 months rent and a security fee, which in many major cities is also another rental payment, right? And so you're really talking about 2 to 4 months of your monthly rental costs, depending upon where you're moving to. And so I think if you are thinking about saving up, that would certainly be something that I would encourage you to save up for. As you learned in my colleague Paul's slides a little bit earlier, you won't get your resources on the first day of school. And in fact, you're going to want to be settled in your new living arrangement at law school, probably at least a week before school starts, so that you can, get an understanding of the area, explore options, map out your best way to and from campus. And so those things are going to take time, and those things are going to take resources, and you're going to need resources during that time while you're trying to figure it out. So think about housing deposits, think about, your rental payments, think about insurance for whatever your living, arrangement is. All of those things may not be at the top of your mind, but these are expenses that exist. But stepping back a little bit, even before then, I know we're in a pandemic right now where, you can't really visit college campuses, but we won't be in that, situation always. And when we are outside of that, you might want to think about saving money so that you can actually visit some schools when, it is safe to do so. And again, I think that whole, aspect of, finding the right fit sometimes, you know, we don't account for that because we're not really thinking about it, you know. But once you have those offers and those financial packages in mind, and then you're thinking about, well, which one is going to be the best fit for me, you know, there are some instances where you're just going to have to try to physically go and see what it feels like. And if that school is clear across campus, then you're going to have to plan um, in order to do so. What other things that I would say in terms of your checklist, they don't all have to be financial in nature. Think about your own physical well-being. You know, have you developed mechanisms in which you manage stress? And if so, start thinking, if you have not, start thinking about that. You know, do you have a regimen? Are you able to just go for a walk and clear your head? Do you go for a run? Do you go to a gym? Do you do something completely different, right? Think about the mechanisms that you have developed to manage, you know, different stressors. You know, law school is difficult. You know, you're going to be in an environment that has, you know, truly gifted people, and you know, they might speak a language that you may not be as familiar with yet, right? Legalese is not the easiest thing for someone to, especially if you're not exposed to lawyers, you're not going to know that. And it moves at a pretty rapid pace. So what are some of the things that you can do to help yourself manage those difficult challenges when they come up? Also, in thinking about transitioning to a new environment, are there things that you can plan for, like non-perishables, that you could just kind of prepare, or, you know, give a list to different, you know, family members or friends or supporters who can help you buy some of those non-perishable things that you can just stockpile so you don't have to think about those as expenses while you're in law school. Travel, relaxation. You know, once you start law school, it's go, 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 right? And so, how do you kind of balance all of those things of meeting with your friends and families? And while I'm thinking about friends and families, what are some of the expectations that you're going to set for them while you're in law school? Those relationships, not going to say that the relationships are going to change, but you're going to have to manage them a little bit differently given the demands that you might be faced with in law school. And so these are all kind of things to think about as you are developing that checklist. Of course, some of those things are going to be financial in nature, but not all of them are. And so those instances where it's not financial and you have some, you know, significant control over those things, make sure that you've built the mechanisms necessary to reach success.
Great, thank you, Dean McShay. So I think we've wrapped up most of the questions. We got through 87 questions during the Q&A, so that's a lot. In addition to the topics that were covered in the session. Thank you all for being so engaged and asking great questions. We are gonna break, and before we do that, Dean McShay is gonna put up a slide that will have the individual school Zoom room. So you're welcome to go to, and also he put it in the chat there too. And we're gonna stay in, the Zoom rooms are gonna be staffed for at least 30 minutes, if not longer. So feel free to come through, and I think, can you click these links from here?
Yes,
Oh, they are clickable.
yes,
Okay.
if you click the link that I put in the chat, it'll pull up a new document, which all the links are live in that document.
Okay, great.
And what I'll also do, if it's helpful, I'll place the individual links right in this chat as well. Mm-hmm.
Great. And it looks like somebody raised their hand. It's easier if you can post a message in the chat for us. It's hard for us to call on people by raising the hand. I don't know if that's possible for you to do that. Or maybe ask it in the individual schools Zoom room. So again, we're gonna break it. We're gonna leave this screen up. Dean McShay, can you leave this screen up while we leave to go to the other Zoom rooms, or do you need to close it out after we?
I'll leave it up, but then I will need to go to a Zoom room as well.
Okay. Yeah, they're not able to see the document, I think. So I think that's the.
Okay, I'll put it right here.
Okay.
I'll do it one more time. Here we are. Can you all see it now? Thank you.
I think they can see it now. So we're going to stay here just for a minute so people have a chance to capture the links they want. For those of you who are ready to leave, go ahead, leave. I'll stay here for a minute, Sean, with you to make sure we get everybody sort of sorted.
Okay.
But if the other panelists want to pop over to their Zoom rooms, and then we'll close up this session in a second once we make sure everybody can get the links. Thank you so much for, again, attending today. And keep in mind, we will be sending out the recorded session. It's probably going to take about a week or so, but then it'll go out to folks that did register for the webinar today. And again, welcome to sort of come in and out of the Zoom rooms, and it'll be people talking about admissions. And if you have other financial aid questions, those can get answered in the school specific rooms too. But thank you so much for attending today. And thank you so much to all my colleagues that were on the panel today too. Great information.
Thank you, Brooke.
Thank
Thank you,
you,
Brooke.
everybody.
Take care.